Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Wow, has the world changed in the last short few weeks here? And I wanted to bring a guest here that could talk to that, what's happening with COVID-19, and specifically how you can lead as a leader through these uncertain times. And so we have Dr. Jeffrey Spahn here, and he's got a book coming out that is going to be published by McGraw-Hill called Leading Leaders with Simultaneity, a new way of leading and following. And in that book, he talks about in crisis, if it's met in a particular way, can create the perfect opportunity for collective flow, unprecedented innovation, and being in sync in the execution of it. And what you're doing. And so I'm just really excited to have him here and to have him share from his expertise and many, many years, decades of experience working with leaders and helping them to evolve. And so, Jeffrey, welcome to Leaders Transformation.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Well, let's dive right in. I mean, these are unusual times.
Yes.
And that requires unusual leadership. In a way that it's like you talk about, it's evolving so quickly. So first of all, how do you define leadership?
Wow, that's a great question. Leadership is typically defined, a leader is defined as someone who has followers.
Yes.
And wow, okay, what's a follower? A follower is someone who goes where the leader goes, who takes the position of the leader, who conforms to the leader. Wow, that's conformity and exclusion of leadership. The exact opposite of what we need so much today, and particularly in crisis, which is innovation and rapid innovation. Conformity doesn't create innovation. We need a leadership that's grounded in diversity and inclusion, not only for innovation, but also for social justice. Yet our fundamental paradigm and mindset around leadership is following. And we need both, but wow, we need a fundamentally new way of thinking about leadership, not just as leading followers, but also as leading leaders. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I love that, because years ago, I remember talking to my parents. We were part of a business organization, and there were certain leaders that would be on stage at conventions and so forth, and they would talk about, being a leader and teaching people how to think and then teaching them how to think right. And I remember saying to my parents, okay, so teaching them how to think right based on whose opinion?
Exactly.
Are we building leaders here, or are we building followers?
Yes.
There's a big difference. And when you said that, I'm just like, yes, that is exactly what's going on. It's like I get, as a podcast host, I get people that will reach out to me, want to be on the show, and they're like, I have 100,000 followers. I'm like, that's fantastic. How are you creating transformation in the world? Because that's what this podcast is about.
Right.
So you can have a lot of followers, doesn't necessarily make you a great leader.
Yes, right.
So
Exactly.
So let's talk about right now. So we're in this midst of crisis. There's panic on so many levels. And it's more than just this virus that's going around. It's the panic that is ensuing from that, the impact on people's businesses, on their livelihoods, on the way their kids are at home now. They're trying to function and work from home, and they've got kids running around. All of these different dynamics going on. And as a leader in a business that is, let's say, now they've got a virtual team, right? And they're dealing with their teams that have all of these dynamics going on.
Right.
What can leaders do to create opportunities in the midst of all this?
Yes. Well, Nicole, I think the first step is just what you said, create opportunity. And, it's the old adage of in every crisis is opportunity, right? Well, I'm going to jump on that. And I think in terms of the crisis we have right now and the situations you just described, whether in business or family, that there is a real opportunity. And the first step is to reframe that. and they think, okay, where is the opportunity here? And the thing about crisis, and the thing about our age, even before the crisis, but the crisis just accentuates the spiraling complexity and the rampant change that's always happening. When that occurs, a formal leader, as you mentioned earlier, what he or she thinks changes, and the assumptions behind that have already changed, and they don't even know it, because information is changing so rapidly and it's being shared rapidly that information and power and leadership is being dispersed in an exponential way that we're not used to. And yet, to the earlier point, our paradigm for leading in our practice is based on leading followers. Yet more and more leaders are coming to the fore, particularly in crisis, because they have in-the-moment information. I just was reading a couple of days ago in the New York Times, the scientists are acting like Doctors Without Borders. Typically they hold and hoard and write their article and get their academic credit. Now that information is being dispersed within 2 hours all across the globe, and people aren't worried about who's getting credit and what country's going to get it there, because it's at home with them. And so that power and information is dispersed, and more people are becoming leaders. Now, the opportunity here is, research at Harvard indicates, teams that are hot or on the move or in the groove are a group of leaders that figure out how to make it work. They do it instinctively sometimes. And what we are doing in the book is making explicit what we sometimes do implicit, so we can choose to do it more often. That's
well,
a
I
lot.
think that's a really great point, because I think there's kind of like two camps. There
Yeah.
are the leaders that have developed this certain skills, leaders at all levels,
Yes.
that or people, let's say, that have developed these skills at all levels, and they're just conditioned. Let's say they've done the workouts, right? They've gone to the gym for long enough that when they have to run, they can do it.
Yes.
They've got to lift heavy weight. They've already developed the muscles to do it. And so those are those teams, like I'm hearing what you're talking about, that's just stepping up. And then there are the other this other group of people that have not developed these skills and are now finding themselves in a situation where they're like, what do I do now? Now I've got to develop these skills really fast, or be left behind, or be left in confusion and so forth. And what do I do with that?
Right.
So it's very interesting. So let's talk about how the ones that, first of all, the ones that are already, like you said, they're leading, they're stepping up, they're seeing this, and they're saying, what can I do to help? Or what can we do to make the most of this? And they're taking action. What are some of the ways that they can continue to do that effectively, using some of your things that you teach in your book and in your workshops and trainings and so forth?
Yeah, and I think that the question there as well is, how can we continue this, and instead of just responding to crisis?
Yes.
And there, I think we need to take a fresh look at a number of things about leadership. One is, wow, what is leadership? Back to your original question. And I think we need an expanded definition of leadership. Leadership, a ship, a group, a container, a ship of leaders. That's what the earth is becoming more and more, is a ship of leaders. So the question is, how do we lead captains? How do captains lead each other? How do leaders lead each other?
Yes.
That's a much different question than how do I get followers to think right, to your earlier point. And so there's a mindset that's involved here that then will inform some new skills. And so then leadership is in the process of evolving in significant ways. It's already evolved from the solo chain of command into shared collaboration, where we lead or follow depending upon the situation. What I see emerging now in the leadership, how do we lead leaders, is to learn to lead and follow in the same action. Now that's a different paradigm than lead or follow depending on the situation. We need to build upon it. By evolve, I mean include and transcend, not to dismiss that. And so, yeah, that becomes okay then. How do we lead and follow at the same time? Because if we all do that, then we get into that flow space and we outperform ourselves and we can step up to the complexity and speed because we're all leading and following at the same time.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, yeah. So, like I've mentioned, part of it is this mindset that I've already introduced. And then it's a matter of what I call bringing and inspiring others to bring a curious conviction. Now, when I said that to a CFO of a major company, industry leading company, he said to me, he's kind of like, whoa, well, I know how to be curious in one moment, and I know how to bring a conviction in another moment. But how do I bring a conviction and curiosity in the same action, in the same moment? And then from there to invite others. So that becomes the key skill that we're talking about here in terms of what often happens implicitly that we're not aware of when we're in crisis, when our best parts show up, is that bringing and inviting others to bring a curious conviction.
So curious conviction.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance this state of wonder and curiosity with a knowing of, like when you talk to that leader, right? And he said,
Yeah,
well, I've
that's
done
right.
this and I've done that. Okay, so
Yeah.
how do I bring them together? What does that practically look like
Yeah.
in, take an example of maybe a client you've worked with or some example that we can relate to.
Right.
Somebody, if they're listening and they're saying, okay, I want to continue, like we were talking about continuing, but also those that are looking to develop these skills, they got to get up to speed fast. How do they, here's the beautiful thing about seasons like this is that it's almost like it levels the playing field in some ways.
Yeah, it does. Exactly.
And it's kind of like, certain parts of the world where they didn't have any phone systems and infrastructure and so forth, and then cellular systems came out, and then they literally leapfrogged all the old infrastructure. They didn't have to go through that step to get to, so they just went straight to cellular phones and smartphones and, in Greece and so forth. And so the same thing here, I think there will be people that they don't need to go in this long progression of training and so forth. They can leapfrog and go straight to that growth mindset and leadership mindset that you're talking about.
Right. And I'm saying that I think curious conviction, I've seen it happen. The practice of a curious conviction from a leader, but also inspiring, inviting others to bring that, because it's a collective thing. If there's just one person practicing a curious conviction, it's not going to have the impact. If everybody is, it's a team sport, everybody is, then we get into that flow space. And then we leverage the chaos, the complexity, the change for us because we're ready for it.
So you're creating a culture of curious conviction.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And a culture of leading leaders. Yes. And a culture of leading leaders creates leaders. A culture of leading followers creates followers.
Got it.
So there's three things, if you know.
Please, yeah.
These three keys to this curious conviction. One is to believe in the creative principle of opposites, the power of paradox. So this is like when you say yes, I say no. That, okay, how can I convince Nicole of my point of view? Or how can you convince Jeff of your point of view? Because I know I'm right? To think right, you need to think like me, right? And that's the tradition that we've inherited, as you demonstrated in the opening. So here it's like, hey, this is not a win or lose situation. This is like, okay, what is emerging here that we haven't seen yet, that we both don't know? And you think of a battery, right? It has a positive and a negative. It doesn't have two positives or two negatives. There's no charge. The charge comes from the difference. and the difference of that energy. And if we can hold the difference of our points of view and our perspective as an opportunity to be creative, wow, we've got something going there. Now, that requires some things. The second step is to bring your convictions as a piece of the emerging conversation or as a piece of the project. And that's different, Nicole, than bringing my piece as the whole to get you to think like me, right? And it's also different than withholding what I know because I got shut down or I'm not confident or whatever. So there's like bringing my piece as a whole or bringing my piece not at all. But bringing a piece, and that sounds really simple, but when everybody sees their convictions as pieces, then we focus on what's emerging, not whether I'm winning this conversation or I'm proving myself smarter than others. And that's that step, that idea of bringing a piece rather than the whole or none, and everyone doing that, it opens things up. And that's what happens when you get in conversations, just suddenly, spontaneously, that take off and have a life of their own. We're getting behind what makes that happen. Then the third piece is just be curious. Now, okay, yeah, everybody says that, but really doing that with these two, with believing in creative principle of opposites and bringing a piece, then there's the notion of being curious. And that's different than judging. Oh, I agree, I disagree, or that's right, that's wrong. But it's observing what people are saying and embracing, particularly when it's different, because that becomes an opportunity to innovate. Because we're leading each other. We want that difference. It's not about conforming to my right thinking.
I love that. Well, and as you were saying that, I was imagining, first of all, in order to do this, this requires a certain level of presence
Yes.
and curiosity. Even the leader that you spoke to who said, oh, wait a second, I've done this and I've done that. How do I do them together, do this together? It requires a certain amount of self-awareness, which I believe that leaders at all levels, really, you need to have that level of self-awareness and awareness and just really tuning in and being present with it rather than just discarding. Like you said, a lot of people say, be curious. What does that actually mean? If we were to really apply that and go deeper into that exploration, that curiosity, I think is really important. Second thing is that there's got to be a level of safety and confidence, or like a safe context for people to share freely their piece, right? And not and know that they have the freedom to do that.
Yes.
So how do you create, because some organizations, as much as they may talk about collaboration and how open they are to feedback, they're really not designed that way. And so you miss out on so much opportunity and innovation and creativity because people are actually afraid to share. So how do you create that in organizations where it may not currently exist?
Yeah. Well, I can give you like two examples there. I really appreciate what you're saying there, particularly about the awareness and then how does curiosity really show up. And so, and the other thing that's kind of tricky here, Nicole, is that, everyone talks collaboration. So a lot of leaders want to be collaborative. And I recall a leader who's, espoused as collaborative. But what he did was he would ask leading questions, like a prosecutor, to lead someone to his point of view.
Right.
And that's prominent, because asking a question is an expression of curiosity, but actually it's a veiled statement to get you to my point of view. And that undermines trust.
Yes.
That undermines the openness, because a lot of times people can't name that, but they feel it, like, well, we are going to do things his way. in contrast to that, an executive with his team, I remember getting a call from in a Friday afternoon, and this team transformed their industry, and the guy was elated because a junior member of the team really differed with him in front of the whole team, and that was a moment of excitement for him because he knew the power that it took for that person to come, and that this person was beginning to believe that he wanted to hear his point of view. And the key thing that this leader did was when this person, who was Jim, by the way, differed with him, he heard it, he reflected it back, and then he asked more questions about it. That's different than saying, oh, next, or something
Yes.
like that, but really showed an interest and had the awareness to listen and then reflect it back and say, is that what you said? So there's that basic listening, but that can be challenging when what you're saying I differ with or threatens my power. I feel like it threatens my power or my position. And that's why it often doesn't happen. So yes, developing that skill. Now we're getting behind what it really means to be curious.
Yes. I love that. And again, like, I love all of what you're saying here. This is just so good because it's really what you're getting to is the core of leadership and what it takes to be a great leader. And a lot of times we can talk about just even that, like, you were talking about curiosity, same thing with leaders. Like, you need to be a great leader. You need to lead people, you need to inspire people and so forth. But underneath the hood, there is this whole inner workings that's going on here, like being curious and allowing, and actually not just even allowing people to offer their opinions and suggestions, but actually inviting it in and getting excited about when you get that, receive that. Because that acknowledgement, I know, like doing workshops myself in the beginning, people tend to sit there and they're not going to share anything, right? But then when you ask a question and you encourage an answer, response, and people start answering, and then you say, well, thank you, that's a really great answer, or really, let's talk about that. Then it creates this freedom for others to step in and do the same thing.
Exactly.
And then, and by noon, like, I can't shut them up, right? Everyone wants to share something, So it's this transformation that happens within cultures just by inviting that, not just allowing it, but inviting it in. So it's so good. Well, again, we talk about this season of crisis, and there's a lot of companies that are going to they're going to die for people are going to die for cover and wait until the dust settles, and then they're going to figure it out. But at the same time, there's so much innovation, like we've been talking about, so much opportunity. What have you seen, and or what do you suggest that leaders do? You used a few examples, like scientists becoming like Doctors Without Borders, and right now the world needs answers. They need these answers. Like when you talk about the whole ship, the world is one big ship.
That's right.
We're looking for answers and we're looking for solutions. And some people on the ship want to have the control and they want to suggest that they have the answers. And then there are other people that actually do have the answers. And there are others that are curious about finding the answer. And then there's of course the ones that are waiting and holding out and saying, somebody I hope has the answer. So how do we as leaders make the most of this and truly collaborate and work together? Like, what in an ideal world, in an ideal ship, what would that look like?
Well, that would be the next step then, to invite and inspire others to a conversation centered around bringing a curious conviction, and bringing a curious conviction to solve a problem, bringing a curious conviction to complete a project. And so that's the second step. One is to bring it myself, the 3 steps I mentioned. Then it's, okay, how do I invite others into it? And that's where then we can have set up a collective accountability system. Okay, so let's have this project. We're working on this project together. One of our guidelines is we want to all bring a curious conviction. And here are the 3 steps for, believe in the creative principle of opposites, bring your conviction as a piece of the conversation, and constantly be curious. And then we can have the conversation, remind ourselves of this, have the conversation, and then check in how we're doing. And then if people vary from it, we can have, hey, let's pause for 10 seconds. How are we doing with the guidelines? Just to kind of build that collective muscle of practicing a curious conviction and creating the conditions more and more and more of getting into that flow space, that space where we're kind of lifted and guided by an energy beyond ourselves into that exponential space where we really start to hum and get some things done in a magnificent fashion. So, wow, that was a fun meeting. Or, whoa, look at what we just did. We changed the industry.
Yes. Now, is there a downside to this, or are there cautions that you would have for this, where sometimes it can get out of hand, or things that leaders, as they're doing this, they need to be cognizant of?
Yes, that's a fabulous question, Nicole, and particularly within a hierarchy, because there comes a time when the leader, again, I use the word evolve. There's a time for chain of command. There's a time for situational leadership, and there's a time for simultaneity, what I call the leading and following at the same time. And then the skill is, okay, when do I use which? When do I practice situational leadership? And, if the house is burning down, which a lot of houses are at this point, businesses are crashing. Well, that can be an opportunity for a leader to step up with some direction, with directives. And the danger would be that if he or she is only doing curious conviction, they're not going to step up to the directive when it's needed. However, if they're only doing directives, there's no curious conviction, so the perpetual innovation isn't happening. So it's an opportunity to apply the situational leadership, which we are building upon, not excluding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
That's what I'm thinking, because there's a point where somebody's got to go, okay, this is the direction we're going.
That's right. And the point, if we've been living with a curious conviction, we have to trust together. You trust me as the leader. And when I say, hey, that people are going to be online. But if all I've done is give directives, I don't have the trust that people are going to be on board with me when I do make the directive, because it can be very important and vital for a leader to practice their directives, their authority to make directives.
So what I'm hearing is that you have this
together.
Yeah, so I'm hearing is you gather the information through that curious conviction. Everybody's bringing their piece to the table, and you're bringing that, and then you're actually creating something even beyond everyone's little pieces.
Yes.
Because there's going to be new awareness, new insights that are going to come as a result of that. And then as a leader, you gather all of that and you go, okay, maybe with your leadership team, maybe there's a core team that you sit down and you go and you kind of condense. It's what I'm hearing and in visualizing is then you come together and you go, okay, so based on all of this, then this is what I feel, or what do we feel even within that leadership team who has a bigger picture on all the different moving parts and said, okay, this is the way that we need to go. What do you think? And then ultimately there's a leader that says, this is the direction, and making the final decision. And I know, like in politics, not everybody likes Trump. Go figure. But no, some people love him, some people don't, right? Yet at the same time, I look at somebody like that, and I look at the people in leadership, and I think, my goodness, who would want that position to be the one to make the final say? I know it's a team and all of that, but that do it, and there's different dynamics going on there. But to be in that position where you have to be the one to actually decide is a huge responsibility. And so there's a great deal of respect that we need to have for people that are in that, and actually maybe hadn't signed up for it before. You know what I mean? Like there are leaders of organizations that are going, okay, I just came on board as CEO and here I am. I've got
Right.
this crisis that I got to deal with.
Right.
And it's a whole much bigger animal than I ever thought.
Right.
And so a little diversion there, but coming back to this idea of being that leader and being able to confidently make that decision at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. And how do you do that, and or have the confidence in knowing that you've done that well and brought in all of the different ideas? Because you may
Right.
not be able to bring it, may not be able to incorporate everyone's idea. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you do that in such a way that still makes people feel like they were part of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and you can't include everyone, but there's really like three areas. And so if this is a shared understanding of how we make decisions, we either, as a formal leader, I make a directive. I can make a directive with counsel, consulting, and having a dialogue, practicing a curious conviction, or we're not going to move until the collective will, till we have. And I use collective will rather than consensus, because a lot of times consensus is the least common denominator. By collective will, I mean that comes out of our differences into something new. And we can't always wait for that. So the leader, needs to have these other two tools to lead by. And to your point of the leader, needing to make some lone decisions, and I think that's going to happen more with the crisis, because we don't have the time. But we need to feed those individual decisions with the collective intelligence as much as can be accessed. So the skills of the curious conviction are huge here to help feed even a directive from an individual, to your point. And then that individual leader, I was just on the call this morning with the CEO, and he was talking about, I'm really feeling kind of heavy about the couple of these decisions because they're important. They have significance. And he said, I'm not used to that. And I tapped him back into how he's made other decisions. And the key component here was that he's able to get himself quiet, to your point of self-awareness, take that deep breath, practice that mindfulness or however it is that you get yourself quiet inside. And then from there, listen to your inner wisdom. Ask yourself a question. My highest self, my inner wisdom, my smart, compassionate person, here's the question. And then what he does is he just writes whatever comes up for him right away. And it gets to the point we can't think it all through. We need the information, but we can't think it all through. When things were simpler, we thought we could. I still don't think we could. But now we take in that information, get quiet, ask ourselves a question, and tap into that intuition that's informed by intelligence. I think that's a cutting edge skill, particularly in today's world, for high executives, and like this CEO I was talking to this morning.
Yeah, it's so good. That's so good. Jeffrey, thank you so much. Oh my goodness, this has been very insightful and at high level, but also practical in the ways that leaders can navigate through these uncertain times. Just before we wrap up, let's talk about virtual teams and
Yeah.
that dynamic, because not only are things evolving and are leaders required to step up and have that responsibility to make decisions that they've never had to make before. But now we also have a team that is fully dispersed or largely dispersed. Most teams are not working still in the office. Some are, to a limited degree. This virtual environment, how do you keep your team connected to the conversation well?
Yeah. Well, it's the first thing for me is that it just points out that the importance of a curious conviction and the three things, and really honing that in. And at the same time, in my experience, and as I've heard others with virtual teams, it's so easy to talk over each other, even not intentionally. We just find ourselves, I was on a call this morning and it was, you know, oh, I didn't intend to talk over, but we were talking over and then we paused, right? We had a little bit of that, oh, okay, who's going next? And then we both go at the same time, so that's part of the virtual experience. So we need to accept that. At the same time, to your earlier point about the decisions, it often requires the facilitator of the meeting when it's virtual to be more active, to be more directive, because you can have 2 or 3 people talking at the same time, and we just can't have that. But if that facilitator is built in the trust and sets the stage, hey, I need to be a little more tight around facilitating this because we're virtual for what I just said, and then be more directive with facilitating the conversation. And that a downside would be to not be directive, but here the directiveness helps the curious conviction. They're not separate. That's what I love. They harmony. They enhance each other. The directive can enhance the curious conviction, the collaboration, and the collaboration can enhance the directiveness. And that's what I mean by harmony, that they seemingly opposites enhance each other. And again, we're back to the power of the creative principle of opposites.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I love this. I just am so thrilled that we scheduled this at this time to have this conversation so we could share this. Now you have your book coming out. Talk to us a little bit about your book that's coming out soon. And you also have a leadership assessment on your website.
Right.
So tell our listeners a little bit about.
Well, I'm very excited about the book and particularly partnering with McGraw-Hill. I expect to sign a contract tomorrow. So I'm very, very excited. And I'm working with some great people there to get the book completed and get it out. Then just recently, earlier this week, I put together a webinar, Billy, kind of expanding on some of the things we've just talked about, how do leaders really step up at this time. And, COVID is not the only thing that's contagious. Courage and creativity can become contagious. And when it's contagious in this environment, it's spectacular. It feels really good. I saw a video of a family that did their own thing on Les Miserables, adapting it to today's world. Oh, it was hilarious. What an example of having fun and creativity in the midst of a very challenging time. So anyhow, that the webinar is to get into that energy.
And so you'll have that on your website.
Huh?
That'll be on your website.
That'll be on the website in the next couple of weeks. And then on the website, if anyone wants to go to the website, there is a questionnaire around what's it mean to lead and follow at the same time, what I call simultaneity. And then I'd be happy to have a 15 to 20-minute coaching call to follow that up for those who fill it out and express an interest.
Fantastic. Jeffrey, thank you so
Thank
much. Yeah, this has been such a pleasure. And I feel good knowing that you're consulting leaders on this type of topic, the CEOs of companies. And I encourage our listeners, if you are a CEO and you are trying to figure out how to navigate these uncertain times, that you reach out to Jeffrey. His website is leadingleadersinc.com. We'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. And so you have access to that, to his webinar that's going to be coming out, and also to the book, his book, when it comes out. We'll make sure that all that information is there. But yeah, if you're looking for some support in how to navigate these, uncertain waters, and be able to navigate that ship of leaders, through those waters, of course, and you're not sure how to do it, then I would encourage you to reach out to Jeffrey and to get some support in that area. You are not alone in this. And there is, even though we have social distancing and we have, self-isolation and all of that, there are some incredible leaders and facilitators and trainers who can help, and coaches who can help to help you navigate these waters. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. And as well, go to leadersatransformation.com. We have well over 300 episodes. I think we're over 320 by the time when will be recorded. And, and all of these leaders, even though we may not be talking about COVID-19, when we're
Mhm.
talking about leadership and we're talking about transformation and mindset and what it means to be an effective leader, all of that, these principles, what I love about our guests that have been on this show is the principles are timeless.
Mhm.
Practices change, but principles are timeless. And so I encourage you to listen to those episodes, go back, review them. There's some valuable insights that can help you in this particular time right now, and you can apply it here. So we encourage you that. We'd love to hear your stories. You can go on, of course, leadersoftransformation.com, reach us through the contact page. You can also find us on social media, and on Facebook, we have our Facebook page, Leaders of Transformation, and we share great stories of businesses, organizations, and individuals who are doing some incredible things. And so you can follow us there and find out. And we'd also love to hear what you're doing to make an impact in the world and how we can help you to get your message out further, whether that's through the Facebook page or having you ultimately on the show. We'd love to hear from you. So we thank you. We appreciate you for being here. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.